I'm Alan Weiss, and this is The Writing on the Wall. Hi, I'm Alan Weiss. This is The Writing on the Wall, and this is episode 45, The Demise of Newspapers. One of my favorite topics, and I'm honored again. It's the Wall Street Journal and the Providence Journal. I bring them to your attention for a very important reason. The Wall Street Journal in 10 years will still be here. The Providence Journal will not be. Newspapers couldn't handle radio. We hear them screaming about the internet. They couldn't handle radio, much less advertising inserts, much less television, much less the World Wide Web. Now, why is this? Well, I've worked with newspapers since 1979. This is the Lifetime Achievement Award of the American Press Institute. I'm the only non-journalist in its 60-year history ever to receive it. It's one of only 7 in the entire 60-year history when I received it. There might be more by now. I'm very proud of it. I'm very proud of the American Press Institute. Good people, wonderful people. But newspapers, and I've worked with the New York Times and the Los Angeles Times and the Hartford Courant and the Cape Cod Times, and you name it, newspapers have had some problems. They've either been family-owned or they've been part of corporate entities like Knight, Ridder, and Gannett. But here are 10 reasons why they've had problems and will continue to have problems. Number 1 is they don't understand technology. The Providence Journal, which I just showed you, actually came out with a scanner at one point with the assumption that you would read an article, scan the barcode into your computer, and then pull up other articles about the topic. The problem is that the beauty of a newspaper is you can fold it back with your feet up and read it during a ball game, or read it out at the pool, or read it wherever you please, and you're not going to lug a computer around with you. What's the point? If the computer's with me, I'll just look at the New York Times online. Newspapers have never understood technology, and they still don't. Number 2 is that they cut instead of investing. Newspapers will tell their advertisers, in tough times, invest more in advertising. In tough times, you have to spend to make money. But newspapers themselves cut. They cut resources, they cut staff, they don't follow their own advice. And so they cut down to the bone and they never quite restore. Third, their standards have declined. I don't know where they're getting their people. Probably they're getting people whom they don't have to pay very much money, as far as I can see. But I can take the Providence Journal here, or even the New York Times, and in any weekday edition, I will find errors, not just in text, but in subheads, in headlines. I'll find a map of Syria labeled as Lebanon. You find this all the time. And the problem is that not only are the reporters ignorant of what they're doing, but so are the editors. Not long ago, the Providence Journal ran an article about a new census. And census in the United States determines who gets representatives. And the subhead on the article said that Rhode Island apparently will be able to retain its 2 representatives with the smallest state. The problem is that the Constitution guarantees every state 2 representatives. You can't have less than 2 representatives. And so saying that it looks like we'll be able to retain both of them, yes, we will, because we're guaranteed them under law. People are missing the point. There isn't good help. Number 4, political correctness often determines the slant of the stories. Some people will be covered more thoroughly than others. Newspapers have not been as concerned with reporting the news as trying to be politically correct in the community. They're worried about circulation. They're worried about advertising. Number 5 is the lack of internal control. The New York Times has had scandals about fictitious stories, fictitious interviews, fictitious characters appearing in their news stories. It's a lack of internal control in the newspapers. Number 6, there's been a tremendous blurring of editorial and reporting. A lot of people talk about this on cable, for example. I mean, the newspapers are not the only ones guilty of this. If you look at Chris Matthews on cable, I don't know if he's a reporter, a columnist, a politician, or just a big mouth. I mean, he never shuts up. But newspapers are no different. You find commentary in what are purported to be articles, and so you're never quite sure whether you're reading something factual or someone's opinion. Number 7, the opposite of cutting costs is to try to get money wherever you can. Do you know the newspapers are actually charging for obituaries, a classic community service? And especially for people who really can't afford, don't have much money, they're charging to have obituaries put in the newspaper. So how do people learn that someone has died to come to pay their respects? They don't unless you pay to have it in there. Number 8, there's way too much wire service copy, too much generic stuff. So even the things they put in there on a larger scope come from the New York Times wire service or the Washington Post wire service. There's nothing independent about it. And that leads to number 9, which is no in-depth reporting. The very strength that newspapers should have, there's no analysis. There's nothing in-depth. There's superficial stuff. It's just like watching a TV clip for 90 seconds or a soundbite. And that leads me to the last overarching problem, which is an industry defensiveness. As I've worked in the industry and as I've watched it, there's this shelter taken behind the First Amendment. This is the Holy Grail. Freedom of speech, First Amendment. The First Amendment does not protect sloppy management. It doesn't protect people who aren't doing their jobs well. It doesn't protect people who aren't managing well. That's no excuse. You can protect the First Amendment and represent the First Amendment and run a tight ship. So what's going to happen, of course, is there are going to be networks, just like there are on TV and radio. Radio wasn't very successful until it created networks across the country. So people were listening to the same thing nationwide. The same thing with television, and you're going to have the networks and newspapers, which will probably be the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, and USA Today. And so if you're living in Denver, you'll get a copy of the Denver edition of the New York Times, and if you're living in Cincinnati, you'll get the Cincinnati edition of the Times or the Wall Street Journal or USA Today, whatever you choose. But the Providence Journal here and the Cincinnati Enquirer and the Fort Worth Telegraph or whatever, the San Francisco Chronicle, they're all going to disappear. You'll have local weeklies that will report on who's graduating and who got a scholarship and whose kids scored in the soccer game. And then you'll have these networks, but very little in between. Koufax will miss tearing them up. Koufax loves to tear up a good newspaper. I don't know if it's the newsprint that has a certain flavor or if he reacts poorly to the editorials. I know that he gets very upset with the American Kennel Club because you're not allowed to show white German Shepherds in the Kennel Club competition. You can show these junkyard-looking German Shepherds, but white German Shepherds, of course the most beautiful of all, they can't be shown. He takes it out by ripping up the newspaper. I hope he never gets a hold of an American Kennel Club official. I'm Alan Weiss. Thanks for being here. Let's go, Koufax. Come on, Koufax. Get in the car. In the car. Good boy.